Hey, what's up guys? I'm Theo Joe, and today we're going to talk about the Apple event that they had this week. Actually some pretty cool stuff they announced. Normally I'm pretty critical of Apple, but they actually did add some really neat features to the new MacBook that I definitely want to talk about. But before we get into the MacBook, they also announced a few new features for the Apple TV, so I want to go over that first briefly. Even a year ago, Apple was starting to talk about their vision for the Apple TV and how they want to add apps to your television experience. They already did that with your phone, and now they want developers to start making new types of experiences to use apps on a TV. One example they showed is Twitter, who actually got deals with the NFL, NHL, NBA, Bloomberg, and even BuzzFeed. And with the Twitter app, what you'll be able to do is live stream through Twitter, who got these deals to watch sports. And then with the Apple TV, you'll also have the Twitter feed live show up next to the sporting event that you're watching, so you can kind of see some interaction with what you're showing, so it's not just absorbing what's on the TV, you can kind of actually see what other people are saying as well. Then they also talked about their new TV app. It's just called TV, not Apple TV, and they want that to be the unified television experience. So the idea is you would go to that on the Apple TV, and it basically shows you everything you would ever want. All your streaming apps from like HBO Go, other Showtime, that sort of thing. Any network that has live streaming that you subscribe to, you can access from there. You'll also have live TV, like from your cable company, then perhaps Netflix, all sorts of live streaming. Basically, the idea is everything in one place. And also they said they didn't want this to be just available for the TV. They also want it, for example, for the iPhone and iPad. So it really is unified, so you can watch your TV from anywhere, I guess. I'm not really sure how they're going to integrate cable boxes into that. Perhaps it takes the stream from the cable box and puts it everywhere in your home, which actually would be kind of cool. Then, of course, in addition to the free stuff you already pay for, there's going to be a store for more stuff you can pay for, movies, TV shows that you don't have streamable, but you just purchase them, I guess, like through iTunes. So there's going to be that as well. And I actually think this is kind of a cool idea. If it plays out well, this could be a really neat app. I tend to use like game consoles right now for streaming apps and stuff. My TV has streaming apps like for Plex, for Netflix, and I usually just use that. But if there's a integrated app with Apple TV, if I were to get that and just literally have everything in one place and not have to switch between video inputs, it might be kind of nice. I just have to see how the interface is, if it's even easier to use in these native apps with the TV. We'll have to see, but I think the idea is good and solid, and I think for a lot of people who maybe don't have all these other devices that stream, this could be a great way to get into that and would be very easy for them. Now I think we should get into the main event, which they talked about, which was the MacBook Pro. So of course, in addition to improved hardware, they added a couple very unique features that we haven't really seen before on a laptop, really. The first thing they added is Touch ID on the MacBooks, which is actually pretty cool. I was actually wondering when they would do this, because it is such a convenient feature, and now maybe they'll be using Apple Pay on the MacBook, not just iPhone. You can log in with the fingerprint, and they actually said that if you put your fingerprint on it, it'll know whose account it is. So if you have multiple accounts and you're on one account, if the other person presses their fingerprint to it, it'll log them into their other account. Of course, as we know, fingerprints aren't exactly the most secure method of authentication, but I think for most people, the benefits are going to outweigh the security risks, because most people aren't going to go through the trouble of stealing your fingerprint to get access to your laptop. And if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. Now, the main new feature they added to the new MacBook Pro is the Touch Bar, which I will say is a great feature. I'm glad that Apple is really getting some innovative features in there, because we know on the iPhone they've kind of been slow with implementing new features, but this is actually really cool. Basically, it's an OLED screen, a mini OLED long bar at the top of the keyboard that you can manipulate. It's touch sensitive and can have a lot of controls on there. It's just another way to control the computer. So for example, you can have some buttons on there to either show information, maybe control system settings, control some apps, really do whatever you want, and it's also customizable. Some examples they showed is using it to control iTunes, scrolling through photos, so navigation, also even editing videos. Not really sure if I would use it for that, but I guess if you can. And also, for example, even Microsoft Word. So there'll be a lot of new apps that will support this in many different ways. Of course, time will tell to see how actually practical and useful this is. I think it will be useful, especially for system settings, because it lets you drag and drop whatever buttons and toggles you want onto it. So if you want to access an app instantly, or maybe control the brightness of the screen or volume or something like that, that would be very convenient. And I think a lot of the gesture controls though, it'd be easier to just use the Force touchpad. They did make a larger Force touchpad, but still, it's a neat feature. Now we can move on to the general hardware improvements. The screen is now a better screen. It's got a 67% better brightness and contrast ratio, pretty awesome, and about 25% larger color gamut. I am a huge fan of good screens, so that sounds pretty awesome. Other hardware improvements are going to depend on whether you're getting the 15-inch or 13-inch. So the 15-inch has a 6th generation i7, very good obviously. For video, it's going to have a Radeon Pro graphics card with 4 GB of VRAM. Not sure why they keep going with AMD over NVIDIA, honestly. I think NVIDIA is a way better graphics card company. AMD is doing a comeback, but I think right now NVIDIA is just killing it. Not sure why Apple goes with AMD. I guess they have a special deal or something like that. On the 13-inch though, it's a bit weaker hardware, understandably. You can either get an i7 or you can get an i5. And for graphics though, it's got Intel Iris graphics. Really? Integrated graphics? Are you kidding me? I don't think you would want to use that for really any pro work, but whatever, if you want the cheaper one. Now for input-output, Apple actually did something kind of interesting with the ports. So we know Apple hates ports. On one of them, they even put one port in the past, but now what they've got is 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. Now Thunderbolt 3 is obviously proprietary, but it also supports USB-C, so it actually is pretty universal. So it's the same connector as USB-C, so that means it not only supports Thunderbolt, but also USB 3.1, which is actually pretty cool, because that means you can now use your USB-C devices into the Thunderbolt port, or a Thunderbolt device into the Thunderbolt port, and there's 4 of them. And Thunderbolt 3 has huge bandwidth, about 40 gigabits per second each, so that's a ton of potential that you can use each of these ports for, and in fact, all of them support power delivery, so you can actually charge using any of the ports, which is actually kind of cool. I think this was a good move by Apple to add these types of ports, and it was very smart by Intel and Apple to make the Thunderbolt 3 connection a USB-C connection, because it just makes everything more universal and solidifies the universality of the universal serial bus. In the past, one of the biggest drawbacks for Thunderbolt was you had to use the special connector. It was a DisplayPort connector, so not a lot of devices used it because it wouldn't work with anything else. But now, if a device supports USB, you can plug it in. If it's Thunderbolt, you can plug it in, so it works on both. Great move. And also, yes, this does have a headphone jack. I was worried during the announcement. They showed a picture. One on the left had a headphone jack, the one on the right did not. So I was kind of worried if they took it out, but it's actually on the other side. So yes, the new MacBook does have a headphone jack. Thank you. Another interesting thing is that with all this extra power, this new MacBook Pro is actually smaller and thinner in volume and thickness than the previous MacBook Air. So I guess they're just gonna get rid of the MacBook Air, because this is basically the same thing except more powerful, so that's pretty neat as well. I should also mention, in addition to the 13 and 15-inch MacBook Pros, they're also gonna release a cheaper 13-inch that doesn't have the touch bar at the top, so it'll just be standard keyboard and all that. So if you want the touch bar, you gotta go with the more expensive 13 or 15-inch. Overall though, I was actually pretty pleased with these announcements. Usually Apple announcements don't really get me that excited, they're mostly disappointing, but I will say that these are some cool new features. I really like the new OLED touch bar, although the Radeon graphics, the AMD, kind of has me scratching their head. I don't know why they don't just go with NVIDIA, but whatever. I wouldn't really use AMD for video editing. I like NVIDIA, especially because of the CUDA cores, so I probably won't be getting a MacBook Pro, but I could see people who maybe use Final Cut Pro as opposed to Adobe Premiere, which is what I use, so this could still be good for a lot of people. And I would be interested to hear what you guys think as well. Maybe you think this is too expensive, or maybe you just hate Apple, or maybe, you know, you've been thinking about getting a laptop and this is a good option. Of course, we can all talk about that down in the comments section below. So that's really all I have to say about this. If you guys did like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up so I know you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it. And if you want to subscribe also, I make new videos at least Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so it should be worth it. Also, if you guys want to keep watching, I've got some other videos I think you'll like right here. You can click on these even if you're on a phone. It's a new type of annotation. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys, either here on YouTube or on Twitter as well. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.